Hello, third grade. It's Miss Casey. Trying to keep up with all the books we started reading and thought that maybe I'd finish them up for you in my home. So, different than the library, I put my pretty backyard in view, and I hope that you're enjoying quarantine. It could be fun, it could not be fun. But anyways, I wanted to read to you because I thought this book was funny and worth finishing, and I didn't want you to forget about me because I missed you. All right, remember, we're reading The Not Just Anybody Family by Betsy Byers about the Blossom family, and Pap, I think, the grandpa, was in a car with a bunch of recycling, and he was in an accident or something, and all the recycling went everywhere, and they got arrested because his car wasn't registered, and I can't even remember every detail. But remember, the young brother was on the roof, and he was going to fly off the roof of the barn, and then they saw the cops come in, and the older siblings just ran for the woods because they were afraid of the cops, and the little brother ended up falling off the roof and breaking his legs and having to go to the hospital. The mom is a rodeo queen, and she's on the road, so she's not at home. And the big kids come home, and no one's there, and they don't know what happened. And Grandpa's in jail, and the kid's in the hospital, and he's made a friend with the guy that's I think a jokester in the bed next to him. So I can't remember exactly where we left off, but I'm going to start from where we left off and try and read a chapter or two at a time to get us through this coronavirus time. All right. And you can color while I read, and no talking over me. Oh, wait. No need to warn you not to just interrupt me because you're at home and I'm at home and I just get to read uninterrupted. So, all right. I miss you. Enjoy the book. Ralphie goes to therapy. Junior was sleepy, but every time his eyes closed, he snapped them open. He had to stay awake. He didn't want to miss it when Ralphie went to therapy. Finding out what was wrong with Ralphie was the only thing he had to look forward to. And yet, like everything in this whole hospital and this whole world, it would probably be a disappointment. Like lunch. The memory brought tears to Junior's eyes. All morning long, Junior had been looking forward to lunch. When the nurse put his tray down and rolled up his bed and he saw a huge hamburger, he could have jumped up and down with joy, if, of course, it had not been for the broken legs. He had just picked up the hamburger, which he intended to devour in exactly 4 bites. A boy in his school was famous for eating a whole hamburger in 1 bite. Junior had seen him do it. Then the boy would drink his whole milk in 1 pull of the straw, put his cookies, however many, in his mouth and go out. Put his cookies, however many, in his mouth and go out to recess. Junior wasn't that good yet. 4 bites was his record. He was just getting ready for the first bite when Ralphie said, "You aren't going to eat that stuff without testing it first, are you?" Junior stopped with the hamburger at his lips. The smell of the bun had made his mouth water. "Why would I test it?" "Stupid, to make sure they haven't put medicine in it." "Medicine?" Junior looked down at his hamburger. He closed his mouth. "Yeah, drugs, you know, to keep you groggy so they can do things to you." "Do they really do that?" "You better believe it." Junior wasn't as hungry as he thought he was. "Maybe I'll just drink my milk." "Is it chocolate?" "Yes." "Then be double careful." "Why?" Junior put his carton back on his tray, exactly in the little wet square where it had been. That's usually their first target. They figure, see, that the kid's going to go for chocolate milk. He probably doesn't get that at home. "Wow, chocolate milk!" And down the hatch without half tasting it. Either that or ice cream. Why do you think you get ice cream every single meal? Junior didn't know they did. He folded his hands over his chest. He looked at the items on his tray. It was a nice tray. Better than at the school cafeteria. Getting a tray this nice had given him a special feeling. At school, Junior had always had to bring his lunch in a paper bag, and he envied the kids that went through the line and got trays. Now he had thought he was part of that happy, privileged group at last. What do these drugs taste like? He asked. He glanced over at Ralphie. He saw Ralphie was eating his hamburger. If it's poison, Junior began. I didn't say poison, Ralphie corrected through a mouthful of hamburger. I said drugs. To Junior, it was the same thing. If it's got drugs in it, then why are you eating it? I'm an addict. I need it. It's my fix. After a long moment, Junior picked up one potato chip. He figured it would be hard to get drugs into a potato chip. He progressed slowly, though, nibbling the edges. Maybe it did taste funny. The nurse came in and said, I thought you were so hungry, Junior. Not really. He wondered if he should swallow the funny tasting potato chip or spit it out. Ralphie said, he's scared there's drugs in the food. I wonder who could have put that in his idea in his head, the nurse said. Junior, your food is not drugged. Of course she'd say that, Ralphie said. Would you like me to take a bit of your hamburger? Junior nodded. She broke off a piece and ate it. Anything else? The milk. Well, let me get a straw. Honestly, Ralphie, we're going to have to put you in an isolation. You get meaner by the day. She took a sip of milk. Now, do you think you can eat something? Junior nodded. I'll be back for your trays later. As she went from the room, Ralphie said, Sure, she tasted the hamburger and the milk, but she didn't taste the ice cream. You better hand that over to me. No way! Now, as he lay waiting for Ralphie to go to therapy, he wondered if he had made a serious mistake in eating the ice cream. It had not tasted the way he remembered ice cream tasting, and he did feel drugged. His eyelids were so heavy he could not keep them from dropping over his eyes, and he couldn't think straight. What time do you go? He asked drowsily. Where? Therapy? I've already been, stupid. I'm back. Junior didn't know whether it was true or not. He couldn't open his eyes to find out. Junior slept. Jailbreak. Break into jail? Maggie yelled. Oh, that's right. They found out Grandpa's in jail, and they did a code word outside the jail, like a bird noise or something, and it answered back so they knew Grandpa was in jail. I'm thinking in the trap of my brain from 2 months ago, or I guess it's only been a month that I last read this. That's what I'm thinking. Maybe you guys remember better because you are younger and your brains work better. And I'm out of coffee. Empty coffee. Okay, here we go. Break into jail? Maggie yelled. Shut up. You want the police to hear you? Maggie lowered her voice. Break into jail. Are you out of your minds? We cannot break into jail. Yes, we can. Look, it's not like breaking into a bank. The police expect people to break into banks. They have alarms set for people breaking into banks. They have alarms in jail, too. They have alarms for breaking out of jail. There's a big difference. Nobody's expecting anybody to break into jail. That would be stupid. Exactly. Maggie, listen. We have to. There's no other way we can talk to Pap. Why don't we call him on the phone? Now you're the one who's out of her mind. You think they let prisoners take phone calls? They let them have one. I saw it on TV. Make one. They let them make one to their lawyer. There's a big difference. No way, Maggie said. I'm not breaking into jail. All right, you don't have to go. If you're scared, you can wait here. That might be better. Then if I get caught, you'll still be free to help us. Vern, couldn't we write him a letter? A letter? Don't you think they open every single letter that comes in the jail? What's your next idea, Maggie? That we bake him a cake with a file in it? Tears stung Maggie's eyes. She was tired. She wanted to be home in her bed instead of in front of the city jail. I want Mom. You think I don't? Vern's thin shoulders sagged. He sighed. He jammed his hands deep in his pockets. He said, all right, you might as well know the worst. The worst? Maggie swung her head around so fast her braids whipped around her neck. What worse could there be? Here it is. I tried to call Mom 3 days ago, and she wasn't where she was supposed to be. The Paisano Motel had never heard of her. There's no way in the world we can reach Mom now. Mom's gone. As soon as Vern said, "Mom's gone," Maggie began to sob. She didn't bother covering her eyes. She just threw back her head and bawled. "Shut up, Maggie. Come on, shut up." He decided yelling at her wasn't going to work. He lowered his voice. "Please, Maggie, listen. Be quiet. They'll hear you inside the station." He drew her down the sidewalk away from the door. She followed, her eyes blind with tears. They stopped beneath an elm tree. "Maggie, please don't cry. Please, you'll make yourself sick. You won't have to go in the jail if you don't want to. And if I don't think it's going to work, if I'm not absolutely sure, I won't go in either." Maggie kept crying. It was such a relief to be getting some sympathy that she couldn't have stopped if she had wanted to. "Maggie," he said finally in one last desperate attempt, "I'll buy you some cowboy boots if you stop." She blinked. "You don't have any money." "I do." "With you?" "Yes." "How much?" $22.77. He remembered suddenly that he had spent $3.30 on the incomplete phone call to their mother, but there was no need to mention that. "Pap gave it to me for helping collect pop cans." "Is that enough for boots?" "Cheap boots?" Maggie hesitated. "But the cheap boots look nice." But the cheap boots look nice, Maggie. Even cowboys can't tell them from the expensive ones." Maggie wiped her tears on her arms. "Tell me what we're going to do," she said. More mud. The Dairy Queen was closed. The lights were out. The parking lot was empty. Still, Mud lay where he had fallen, beneath the carry-out window. He was like a character in a fairy tale who had been put under a wicked, hurtful spell. Around him were the dried offerings of strangers. The only movement was an occasional twitching of his long, dusty legs. Mud was running in his dreams. It was the silence that brought Mud to his senses. As long as people had been fussed over him, begging him to eat, "Come on, boy, it's hamburger. See hamburger." It had been easy to lie there, out of it, too unhappy to move. Even when a boy had lifted Mud's lip and poked a piece of bacon cheeseburger inside, Mud had not reacted. "Don't do that," the boy's mother had cried, swatting at the boy and hitting Mud. Mud did not flinch. Another swat. This time the mother hit her mark, the back of the boy's pants. "Didn't I tell you not to fool with those strange dogs? Do you want to get rabies?" "No." Now the parking lot was so quiet. Mud could have been the only living creature left in the world. He was awake, and he knew he was going to have to open his eyes. He opened one. He rolled it up to the Dairy Queen, down to the street light. Then he lifted his head and looked around. He saw nothing that looked familiar. He could not even remember lying down here. He was not hungry, but it was easier to swallow the scrap of bacon cheeseburger that was already in his mouth than to spit it out. The scrap hit his empty stomach, causing real hunger. Still, he was selective. He ignored all bread that smelled of mayonnaise and all French fries. He separated pickles, onions, tomato, and lettuce from meat and made a discard pile before eating the meat. He ended the meal with a little chocolate shake which someone had thoughtfully poured in the lid of the cup. He licked the excess from his whiskers. Mud shook himself, stretched, and lifted his legs in direction of the Dairy Queen. Then he went to the curb and looked both ways. The street was deserted. He ambled to the corner. There Mud hesitated. He stood with his nose high, smelling the evening air. He took a few steps to the right, then to the left, figuring out which smells came from which direction. Mud reached a decision. He lifted his leg on the telephone pole, and then, with a sort of ambling gait, he set off in the direction of town. Mud was a one-man dog. He could not even remember his pre-pap days when he and Minnie had chased cars, when the farm girls down the road had dressed him and his brother up in doll clothes played baby with them. "How's your baby today?" "It's sick. Mine's sick too." And he and his brother ate medicine made of grass until they could escape and run through the yard, tripping on their dresses. Mud's life began when Pap reached down in the ditch and took his shivering body in his gentle hands. In all the years since Mud had recovered from the accident, Pap had taken him everywhere he went. If Pap went to the barn, Mud went to the barn. If Pap got in the truck, Mud got in. On the rare occasions When Pap said stay, Mud waited in the back of the truck, curled up on a gunny sack, with his ears turning radar-like for the sound of Pap's shuffling feet. His job in life, as nearly as he could figure it out, was keeping Pap company. Now his job was even clearer. He had to find Pap. He crossed the deserted street, pausing on the yellow line to sniff the evening air. Okay, one more chapter. But full disclosure, do not feed your dogs chocolate milkshakes. Chocolate, bad for dogs. Bad. And milkshakes may cause diarrhea. And unless you want to pick that up, no chocolate milkshakes. And you don't say shut up. Period. I should have corrected it and not read it and just said be quiet. Be quiet is a much better way of saying that word. Miss Casey, it's always on it. Visitors. All the things Junior wanted to invest had already been invented. It was the story of his life. He would say, I'm going to invent shoes with little wheels on the bottom. And before he could describe how people would roll around like magic on the wheeled shoes, Vern would sneer, and what are you going to call them? Roller skates? Then Junior would remember where he had gotten the idea. He had at various times wanted to invent motorbikes, pogo sticks, and the harmonica. I'm going to invent a tiny little musical instrument, like a sideways horn that you blow in and you can slide it up and down and get different notes. Why don't you call it a harmonica? Another of Vern's sneers. That night, after supper, Junior remembered with tears in his eyes that he had once almost invented the harmonica. What made him remember was that Ralphie's two little brothers came to see him, and one of them brought Ralphie a tiny harmonica, exactly 1 inch long. He had bought the harmonica in a joke store. As soon as Ralphie began to wheeze out a tune on the harmonica, tears came to Junior's eyes. It wasn't only that some inventor had gotten the idea first and beat him to it. It was that no one had brought him a tiny harmonica. Nobody had brought him anything. And he didn't have any visitors. He was never going to have. He never was. And if they did come, they wouldn't think to bring him a tiny harmonica. As he lay there, wiping his tears on his top sheet, listening to an off-key chorus of Dixie from the next bed, he suddenly wished he had told the policeman where to find Vern and Maggie. He wished he had said to the policeman, look behind the house in the woods. They have a hideout by the ravine. No, he wished he had told the policeman to go in the woods and give the whistle of a Bob White. And when Vern and Maggie ran out thinking it was him, the police could grab them. He wished he had thought to say, you better bring them for identification. He wanted to give them a hard, unforgiving look before they were led away to prison. What's wrong with you? One of Ralphie's brothers asked. The brother had been lying on the empty bed across from Junior, pretending he had appendicitis. Now he was sitting up, cross-legged. While Junior was deciding whether he could tell his story without starting to sob, Ralphie switched his harmonica into his cheek and chanted, he fell off a roof, he was trying to fly, he hit the ground, he thought he would die. A poem by Ralph Waldo Smith. Then he blew one loud, piercing chord that used every hole on the harmonica. After that, having had the whole thing turned into a poem, followed by what sounded like a musical raspberry, Junior didn't feel like saying anything. You know what? Now nobody in your family will ever be allowed up on the roof again, the brother said. Ralphie fell off the riding lawnmower 5 years ago and cut off his leg, and none of us have been allowed on the riding mower since. We can't even sit on it when it's in the garage. Just because he was stupid enough to fall off, we have to be punished the rest of our lives. Stupid's another word I don't want to hear you saying. Junior wiped his tears on his sheet, that time because he wanted to get a closer look at Ralphie's brother. Is that what happened to him? He nodded his head in the direction of Ralphie's bed. Yes. What did he tell you? That a crocodile bit off his leg at Disneyland? He didn't tell me anything. That's what he usually tells people, but he's never even been to Disneyland. He fell off a mower, and the mower cut off his leg. And, the other brother said, moving into the conversation, he's had 5 operations because his bone keeps poking through. He just had one, and now he's getting a new leg. Every time he grows, he has to get a new leg. There's his old one over in the corner. You want to see it? Junior nodded. The brothers had a short tug of war with the leg to see who would have the honor of bringing it to Junior. The bigger brother won and ran over to Junior's bed. He laid the leg on Junior's lap and sat on the side of the bed, jiggling up and down. Junior didn't even feel the pain of having his legs bounced. In his lap was Ralphie's leg. Ralphie's leg. Big Mouth sneered Ralphie from the next bed. Big Mouth, sneered Ralphie from the next bed. When I get my new leg, the first thing I'm going to use for it is to kick your guts out. Okay, that's all for today. I'll try and keep up with this so that you guys we can finish the book. But we're a little bit over halfway maybe. So anyways, ta-ta for now.